So,
Just to clarify, if a few people from our SOC want to spectate, does Gao spectate? Does Gao consent spectate?
so I guess recording is set ready. Yeah, PM whenever ready.
Yeah, POI is just right in the chat. If you don't offer, I'll ask myself at some point. So yeah, be ready with one. When a character meant for a nappy-haired and dark-skinned South Indian girl gets played by a white-looking, Western-passing North Indian girl, that is when Asian cinema has failed to be representative of its own population, and that is when we've played into the narratives perpetuated by and made for white Western Europeans. I think this is quite bad, and a part of why this is happening is due to the heavy emphasis on star power and marketability. We regret it in totality. Couple of things that get done. Firstly, let's start off by setting up this debate and what we think is important overall. Firstly, let's look at why main characters need to specifically be representative for GovBench to work. Why do we think it's so important about these characters? I think that when it comes to things such as visibility, the award shows, the buzz, and the posters that are made around it, overall, the person that you put most emphasis on is your main character. That is to say, I remember who won the best lead actor or lead actress in an Oscar ceremony. I don't remember who wins a random supporting character award. I think therefore main characters are quite important in the way that we shape our perceptions of certain pieces of media. B, the most amount of social media buzz is often created around the main character. That is to say, the kind of clips that get shared online are clips that revolve around the main character insofar as they take up the most significant chunks of the movies and are doing oftentimes the coolest things. Look to the action hero in a James Bond or a Bollywood movie. I think these are oftentimes the characters that matter most to people. Secondly, I think the issues we've seen with Asian cinema historically can be folded up into twofold. Likely we've seen significant issues with media being unrepresentative. That is to say, we've had issues where North Indian people play Southern Indian characters just because they appear more white passing, they have more Western facial features, and they have whiter and fairer skin. I think this is a significant issue we've seen throughout Bollywood history and throughout Asian cinema as a whole. I don't think Op is going to say that this isn't a thing that has happened. We can both concede to this. B, oftentimes I feel like these movies have fed into racist narratives. That is to say, we've had Shah Rukh Khan promoting skin whitening cream based off of the career that he built off of being a successful Bollywood actor. I think this is quite bad and notably not happening on the flip side. Note, this is a retrospective motion. This means that we date all the way back to the inception of Bollywood. So all the way in like 1920s or something, way back when racist narratives were significantly prevailing and Indians were not represented in their own media and Asians as a whole. I think this is broadly applicable. This debate does not take place today where we have movies like RRR that have dark-skinned Indians taking up a significant portion of the main character base. This is why this motion is retrospective. That's what it's about. 3, what do talented actors who do not have star power look like? I think threefold. They oftentimes have funky last names. That is to say, they do not come from long dynasties or families that are well established within the movie making business. And B, they often have traditional non-Western looking appearances. That is to say, darker skin, nappier hair, and overall different facial features that do not align with Western standards. These are likely the people that would be ignored because they'd be perceived as having no star power because they don't have marketability when it comes to being able to putting their face on skincare products and such. C, I think that oftentimes people who do have star power then are actors that are really fucking beautiful. That is to say, when you have Shah Rukh Khan or you have all these other actors that have star power, that is to say, the actors that look good in interviews and the actors that look good on posters are actors that are very, very good looking, horribly attractive to like the craziest extent. I think that's largely what star power is defined by, mostly. Notably, then, the things that mean that you do not have star power are factors that you cannot change. They are your appearance, they are your last name, things that you cannot work on, things that you cannot improve on. This will become important on Leander's argument later. Now then, the counterfactual is that we likely bite the bullet. Probably not every single main character is going to be a person that is ugly and, representative of everybody or whatever you might think, disabled or whatever thing is representative. But I think probably there's going to be more of these people insofar as we're judging people on their raw acting talent and not factors such as their beauty or things that are more important for their marketability or things that they cannot control. First argument on why unrepresentative media then is bad, now that I've proven this media is likely unrepresentative when we focus on star power. Framing. 2 things. I think that representative media and movie main characters are really, really important for two things. A, they give people role models. That is to say, we look up to the people that we see in movies insofar as we make movies about people that we want to look up to. Look to the action heroes that young boys grow up aspiring to look like, or look to the beautiful models or other characters that young girls are grown up to be told that they should idolize. I think likely we find a lot of role models within these movies. B, I think that characters that are more representative of who we are more enjoyable to watch. When I'm watching a movie and I have somebody that has my cultural background or looks like me or is able to talk like the same way that I do, I'm able to derive more joy out of this movie insofar as I can imagine myself in these scenarios and therefore enjoy it more. Why is it bad on their side of the house? And what issues has this motion historically cost, and the emphasis on star power specifically? One, I think that actors that are hired particularly for their star power are actors and actresses that create unimaginable and unattainable beauty standards. That is to say, the kinds of people you hire, I've already outlined, are people with star power that look really, really good and can talk really, really well, not necessarily that they're great actors. This creates horrible beauty standards insofar as most people cannot look like these people. Most Indians do not have these white and Western facial features, therefore do not inherently look like these people as they are. Why does this create bad incentives? Before that, can I take a point? No point. Moving on. I think, sure, go.
If Brad Pitt features a 10-minute cameo in an indie movie, it's going to be Brad Pitt that comes in the highlights. It's the famousness that brings you in the highlights. It's not you being a main character.
Yeah, but like, who the hell makes like a poster and markets their whole movie based off of a 10-minute cameo? Let's be real here. And secondly, I think the most connections that people make to the movie is the one that they make while they're watching it. And insofar as the main character is on the screen for 2 hours, that's likely what their biggest takeaway is going to be. Main characters are important, not cameos. Be real. Now then, why does this create bad incentives for these actors? Insofar as I think they're hired to be really, really beautiful, they're also profit incentivized. How do they make their profits as an actor that was hired on star power? I think that they do it just by looking really, really good and selling you products that make you convinced that you are able to look like them one day. This looks like skin whitening cream being a significant thing that gets sold all throughout India based off of Shah Rukh Khan's fame that he was able to derive by being in these movies. I think this is really, really bad. And secondly, notably, this monetization scheme is very, very coercive. That is to say, you believe that you can look like these actors if you buy their products. You can regain some of that star power and that marketability that they have if you spend money on skin whitening creams or hair straightening products that are chemically really, really bad for you. You believe that you can look like these actors insofar as they're able to convince you so, and you are likely going to believe them because you idolize them. They're in the roles of the characters that we think are really, really smart and intelligent. The action heroes, the scientists, the surgeons in movies about medical dramas. I think that's why you're likely going to be coerced into buying their bullshit. Now then, why is it that the flip side is better? I think having more representative actors means that, one, these actors came from less privileged backgrounds. That is to say, they don't have these same incentives to rob you of your money or to sell you skin whitening creams is the same way as actors that were hired purely for their star power do. But secondly, they don't have the same capacity. That is to say, if an uglier actor that wasn't hired particularly because they're good looking, but just because they were a good actor, tries to sell me a skin whitening cream, I'm not going to buy it from him insofar as he cannot coerce me to the same extent, insofar as I don't want to exactly look like him anyway. That's why the comparative is better. That's why we win on the counterfactual. Proud to stand on Gov.
All right. I'll thank PM for a wonderful remark. I'd like to welcome Leader of Opposition whenever you're ready.
One thing.
Yeah, I'm actually audible.
Yeah, you are.
Just give me like 20 seconds. Yep. Starting my speech in 3, 2, and 1. We're going to base our path to victory on one thing that government concedes on, which is these people who are already popular have more marketability. What is our path to victory then? 3 arguments. Firstly, why is the quality of content better on our side of the house in the Asian entertainment industry? Secondly, why does the industry shrink on their side of the house? And thirdly, why does the kind of receptiveness that exists to the messaging that comes out of the movies is vastly lesser on their side of the house? Before I move on to broader responses to the premise features of government case, right? Firstly, notice that in the government's own counterfactual, if you are rich and privileged, you still have better agents, you still have things like better access and better networks to the audition network. So what happens is that you still have a significant comparative advantage over people who are not privileged to these auditions in the first place, even in a talent-based framework. So I'm not sure why the virtue of this becoming talent-based and the consideration of the stargaze being removed is solely the factor due to which suddenly like people who are not privileged disproportionately enter the industry in the first place. So I'm not sure how they are still achieving solvency, right? Even secondly, notice the single impact that comes out of government case is role models. Sure, even when you go out and like posit this main characters or from non-palatable looks or are from not unprivileged backgrounds, I'm not exactly sure how people are being receptive, and exactly I'm going to prove the flip of it in our argument, right? What is the counterfactual that we are assuming them? I'm going to be very charitable to government and assume the best case for government. We simply assume that like you rope these actors in or main characters in through auditions, which then will insulate the influence of star power, nepotism, popularity, and whatnot. What is our arguments then? Threefold. Why? Firstly, why do we think the quality of movies and generally the content that is coming from entertainment industry is lower? But before that, why do we think the entertainment industry shrinks in the first place? Notice that just by the virtue of these people being more popular on Ask at the House, two things happen, right? Firstly, the capacity for the producers to market the movie is much more because they have a strongly existing fan base. These popular people have a strongly existing fan base. So when a director pitches to a producer or a production house that this particular person with a lot of popularity is the actor, more producers are willing to invest in these movies in the first place because they have a sense of certainty, which is very important in an industry like media and entertainment. Secondly, notice not only do you have more people or producers willing to invest into a movie or show, but also they're willing to invest a lot of money. That's why you have budgets in the movies in which these people who are popular like come in the first place, right? This also explains why this dominant trend exists in the first place in the status quo. Now, what is the implication of this then? On the counterfactual, there are two reasons due to which these things don't happen on the comparative. Firstly, because you don't have certainty of success for these producers, even when the directors go and like write these stories, they're less willing to go and like have these actors or rope them in for their projects that they deem very valuable. Even if these directors rope them in as actors, like people with non-palatable looks or people with lesser marketability and stuff like that, producers are lesser willing to invest. At a point at which the characterization of producers empirically in the real life are typically businessmen who tend to have multiple businesses. These people are not desperately or actively looking out to invest in movies or shows. So in the absence a sense of certainty that they can get from the entertainment industry, they simply invest this pool of money that they could have invested here in other businesses. The implication of this is even in the paradigm of opposition, of government, in which you have disproportionately more non-popular actors, the funding or the overall pie is significantly smaller for you in the first place. The bottom line of what we prove from the legwork that I have provided so far is twofold. Firstly, you have like lesser pie or lesser funding for media industry, which means you have lesser movies coming out, lesser frequency of shows coming out. Even the quality of shows that are coming out are low intuitively because of low funding. I'll analyze this further. But more importantly, there's lesser employment because notice, bigger funding means more side characters in a movie or more wages for side characters in a movie. What this then means is that not only are you decreasing employment, you're also decreasing the wages for people who are sustaining or who are persisting to act in this industry or to sustain in this industry because of the passion in the first place, which means you're pushing them out. Secondly, even notice, provided that we have already proved you have vastly bigger budget on a comparative, what does this mean is that you're actually able to spend more money on things like CGI, on things like good script writers, on things like good directors and stuff like that. These things have direct implication on the content or the quality of movie or show that is going to be created generally in the entertainment industry. Sure, these actors are paid high salaries. Government can't just come out and say, "Oh, huge proportion of this pie just goes to these actors," so you don't have this quality at all. But rather, because the overall pie is better and bigger that we have established, what then happens that you still have comparatively larger and vastly bigger budget for you to invest in these things. Then, despite having capacity, why do these people have incentive to spend money on all this stuff rather than just riding on the backs of popularity of these actors in the first place. Two reasons, right? Firstly, competition exists between these actors to begin with, who have similar level of popularity or similar level of star power in the first place. What this then means is that this is where they have to create differentiation between a couple of movies. Even when they are able to compete with small actors, they're not able to compete with the similar actors. So they have to create some differentiation, and that's why these things come out. The manifestation of this is also the kind of messaging that is done in movies to begin with. Before I go to the third layer of argument, sure, POI.
Yeah, but like, why should we care about the impact of more people being paid to do movies? Surely they can work other jobs. Surely the producers just invest in other things instead. This is very non-exclusive.
No, entertainment industry shrinking is exclusive to your side. Where will you get more jobs? They can also get jobs in your side as well. All right. Thirdly, why is the kind of receptiveness to messaging dies down? Before that, why is the kind of messaging that comes out from this content is good in the first place, right? Notice that these directors or producing houses or even actors are generally from higher echelon or higher economic classes. What this then means is that they are relatively more progressive or relatively more liberal in the values that they hold. Even when they are like adhering to marketability and stuff like that, they're pushing out progressivism, they're pushing out liberalism in all ways possible in any given demographic. And this is the reason why we think that we posit that the kind of messaging that comes from this content is good. Then why do we think receptiveness is vastly more on our side of the house on a comparative? Notice, when large fan bases are there for these actors, these people need certainty to go and like pay for the ticket and watch a movie in the cinema theater. Large actors make it possible so with a huge marketability. Secondly, you have more money for distribution marketing, and upon which you have more budget, and that's why even receptiveness is more in the first place, and that's why we win so proud to oppose.
Right, thanks a lot for a wonderful remark. I'd like to welcome BPM whenever you're ready.
Checking I'm audible.
Yeah, you are.
Amazing. That's in some framing. Even if I market the movie also on a cameo, right? The main characters are the ones who I remember. So I remember their portrayal of a character and how they will act. They have the most screen time exposure to like the viewer simply because they are on screen for the entire 2 hours, not just for a 10-minute cameo. Therefore, they have like the longest time to make the viewer feel represented by them, right? So this is still the largest impact, even if it has from cameos, right? Secondly, even if the privileged people are far more represented to the exact same extent that they get all of the same roles, op impacts then are symmetric because then I can still pretty market all of these people that get all of these good roles, right? I'm still likely to do that, even if I look for only talent and only give all of these people because they have like better connections and therefore can break in better. Still, our principle that is going to come at the end of my speech still stands because we have just a much lower locking out barrier. Principally, we still win this debate, and at that point, like all practical impacts would just be symmetric. The film industry would still like be making the same amount of money as an op. I don't see like why it is strategic for them to push this. But more realistic is that there are a few super talented people who are represented. This means that we still have some representation, which means that minorities already feel far more represented than on the comparative where they don't get this like sort of representation, right? So like just seeing a couple of movies have people from like less privileged backgrounds already makes me feel like it is at least possible, right? This is the same. The second thing here, minorities feel like representation and like and being able to act in these movies is attainable in the first place, which means that the little poor girl doesn't give up hope because just one single movie makes you feel like being able to break into this market is possible. Oh, what then does op tell us? Firstly, they tell us that there's like a lack of quality of content. We actually think that we get better content on the things that actually matter. That is the viewers' enjoyment when they watch this movie, right? Because I get a more accurate portrayal of those characters that are being played. That is, I just don't buy the movie and like the realisticness of the movie as much. If someone who's supposed to be South Indian is being played by like some like North Indian person, right? Secondly, I also just like. I see like a lot more like the talented actors, ones that are much more able to like portray the emotions of the movies, like the intricacies of the character. Therefore, I get much more enjoyment and connection with the character. Secondly, they tell us that there's just a smaller industry. Firstly, I honestly just don't care about the movie executive profits, right? Even if the profits are halved, they still make some money. They still have an incentive to invest at the point at which they still make some profits, right? I think secondly, they just also have an incentive to invest because this is a massive, massive market. There are billions billions of people living in Asia, like all across Asia, like 4 billion people, half the world's population. That's like a massive amount of like viewership entertainment base, right? Especially since this is a growing market, because they get more like far richer. Like Asia's economic growth is far larger than the one of the US. But also, secondly, since they have larger population growth, a lot of people are still going to invest there. But especially at the point at which we create a growing market, because minorities are actually more likely to watch because they feel represented by these movies in the first place, right? So there's still earning potential there. People are still going to invest in making movies. But even if they don't, people still get enjoyment from really low budget movies, right? 50 years ago, the movies were so much worse. People still really enjoyed them. I still watch the Star Wars movies from 50 years ago and still get a massive amount of enjoyment. A lot of people even think they're much better, right? Also, I don't care if the movie is only there for monetary gains at the point at which it creates no societal value for no actually representation of minorities, but rather like is creating an active detriment through like exacerbating the same kind of stereotypes that happen again and again for saying, for saying, oh, all of these minorities can just be played by all of these majority actors, even though they look completely different, even though they cannot relate to the experience of the character that they're actually supposed to be portraying. At the point at which opposition stands for that kind of active societal detriment, I don't see how they are likely to win this debate. I'll take a POI. Okay,
What is your
moving on to the principle. When your state is okay, sure.
What's your end benefit of having minority actors as lead roles?
Simply because, like, Darin already told us all, they tell you all of these things, right? Listen to his speech. But also on a principle, right? Even if we don't get a single person actually being able to break in, simply the fact that they could potentially break in and not being locked out is already a principal benefit in and of itself, right? When at the point at which your state is built on meritocratic principles, it is your principal duty to uphold these. Meritocracy exists. It is the basis of society and our understanding of how societal value is contributed. I get rewarding for being the best. I get a higher pay if I work hard and the best of my job and create the most value for my employer. I enter the job because I believe that the wage I earn is to a degree fair, and I accept that other jobs pay better because of the skills that these people have provide more value. Similarly, without this meritocratic principle, acting in and of itself would be understood as a classist and principally unjust act, as people would be rewarded not for their ability in acting and the amount of artistic value they contribute. They are also not judged on their willingness to work hard, right? Talent, unlike beauty, isn't just there. It needs to be actively developed, and you still need to work hard for it. Even if I'm talented, I still need to work really hard to develop this talent, right? Note that it isn't about how much economic value is being contributed, but how society perceives it. Societal understanding matters because they are the ones who feel hurt by meritocracy not existing, one of the fundamental principles they believe in not being respected. And societal values is the quality of art. When you watch a movie, you notice good acting. You don't appreciate how many viewers and actors are likely to contribute to the movie because you just don't have the same view as a movie exec, right? The society also sees the little girl from a minority who has the dream to become an actor, who is told she cannot act because she isn't pretty, even though she is super talented, and perceive it as an unjust as a society if she is being locked out simply because some movie executives decide she's not pretty enough. Societal value in a film isn't the amount of money it makes for rich film executives, but in the entertainment it provides to the viewer and the general average person in our society. This is the primary way the average person enjoys and interacts with movies. Meritocracy is hurt on their side when we lack the information to make fair decisions. Others are rewarded based on unequal factors. Star power comes from money, from connections, not talented hard work. They win because they lock others out, not because they are the best. They cannot access this. They cannot access meritocracy in this sector. Meritocracy is helped on our side when we ensure that actors are recognized and rewarded with jobs for the value that they contribute. We allow value to be distributed based on who performs the job best, rewarding their skills. The legitimacy of the system must be upheld, as this is the fundamental way people derive enjoyment off of it. Meritocracy provides an incentive to try and be the best. It pushes people to become better and try to create more value in the first place. It's the prerequisite for any utilitarian impact Op tries to claim in the first place, but also on a practical impact. At the point at which we allow people to win in acting by locking others out, we also justify the narrative to arise that it is okay to lock people, other people that would create much more enjoyment out for your own gain, not based on how good you are, but how rich your daddy is.
All right. Thanks, DPN, for a wonderful remark. I'd like to welcome Diallo whenever I'm ready.
Am I audible?
I guess your audio is a bit.
Am I invisible? Hello.
I think it's a bit unstable, but I think it's now audible and visible too.
Okay, great. Just interrupt me if you can't hear me. I'll start from there again. Okay, I'll be beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Let's take down the largest claim coming from side opposition first. I'm going to take down all the claims and actually flip them because they give us a lot of benefits and a lot of concessions. The first claim is that merit is extremely important because merit needs to be representative for two reasons. One is there is a principle that whoever does the best should get the best, and second is because you need minority actors as lead actors within your movies in order for some benefit to accrue, which is not entirely clear. Let's deal with the principle. The principle is that, the quote unquote, from their speech, from their notes, the person who generates most value for your employer is the most important person and should be given priority. The problem is that they never define why the metric for generating value, specifically in acting, only has to be your skills of performing the act in the first place. Let's have an intuition of this with how other fields work. In sports, you pick players that are not particularly brilliant, but will probably be a good captain or a good strategist or good for their specific role because of that, because of the fact that they bring extra value to their organization. In a corporate organization, you would pick both technical people as well as people who are good at giving orders and managing other people, because people exist in different skill sets. The metric always is what is the value you're providing to the institution that you belong to. And with that metric, we tell you that you're able to provide significantly more stardom, you're able to attract significantly more eyes, you're able to get significantly more revenue of you being a star, and we think that you get significantly more value for the organization. And that's their own principle and their metric. We think that it's completely fair for these people to get into these movies. About nepotism, we think that nepotism, while the concept of nepotism in and of itself is wrong, we think that the principle they highlighted themselves, if you're the father, like if you're the son or daughter of someone extremely famous within the acting industry, we think that you subsequently bring a lot of revenue to that movie, you bring a lot of advertisements, you bring a lot of funding. So on the principle, we take it. Now on the pragmatic, understand that the end goal of going on and providing this minority representation within movies is quite simple. They want minorities to feel represented, and they want this content to go and reach as many people as possible, whether it's a social message or things like that, right? That's the end goal of theirs. To achieve this end goal, we need two things to happen. One, we need a producer who's brave enough to pick these stories up and write them despite the risk that they might be a niche and that they might face backlash. Second thing that you need is you need a platform that propels these stories towards the mainstream and makes them large enough to do so. For the first thing, you need a producer that is brave enough to do this. No producer is going to go and put money in a loss-making movie unless they have an absolutely brilliant, phenomenal, and niche idea, which are some examples of things that have happened with indie movies in the past. But the large majority of those are ideas where you have your lead actor be somebody who is extremely famous for you to hedge the risk and for you to get the niche executed. Government response to this is that, oh, they look very different from their role. That's absolutely stupid, because they don't need to be the minority person themselves. A lot of these movies you see where the main character would be like a cop or would be like, their friend or things like that, and there would be two lead roles where the minority role is one and the poster boy role, like there is an extremely famous actor as another. This setup works perfectly well because we think that the lead role is picked on, like the second role, which is created as a lead just because there's someone famous, makes the movie propel forward, and the actual role that's played by an individual from this minority, or that at least represents people from this minority, gains significantly more traction. These are the few benefits that flip Gov's case on their side, right? Firstly, we think that because these movies are larger at scale, have larger budgets, and have larger projections and have better networks, they're able to employ significantly more amount of side who go ahead and take cameos, who go ahead and do scenes on the set. They are able to get significantly more institutions and interns and things like people who do video editing and productions, script writers, and all of these teams grow significantly larger. Note that from Gov's benefits, all you get is lead actors sometimes being of non-minority or of minority cultures and them getting chances. On our side, these movies are of a larger, these investors are investing more, amount of employees that are able to, like the amount of people within the industry that are able to get recognition, get within the scope, go and interact with the top stars of the industry, go and work with top directors of the industry, go and get a couple of days on that set and gain the recognition and better their accolades on the resume and things like that, significantly more. Which means that in every possible metric of going on and providing employment within this industry, we win in every possible way, because we significantly outweigh this benefit simply by virtue of the scale of people that we're talking about. Manan will give you more gains later in there. So then now what's extremely, I'll actually take a POI before I move on to the next part of your case.
Yeah, if it's principally meritocratic to be picked purely for the amount of value you bring, should schools then pick their best student based off of whose daddy can donate most money to the school, or to who gets the best grades?
Okay, let's be very clear the difference between institutions that need to give to people as service versus institutions that are built for self-serving profits and things like that. Schools have a duty to go ahead and educate children. Producers have a duty to go ahead and just produce movies. You can't just give an example or an intuition and think that that is true just by virtue of doing this, like just by virtue of stating an example. But secondly, and very importantly, we think that even if we were to bite the bullet and say that some of the top schools should go ahead and have a value-based system just because of how they can become a better school, we think that's completely okay, and it's a trade-off we're willing to take, because Op needs to fight us on this and tell us, not using the example, but tell us in the real realm of the debate why this is wrong in the first place. The second problem with the case, then, the second line of the case that they bring that is highly problematic is that, oh, there will be beauty standards attached to these people, thus only people that look beautiful will get these roles. Problem is, exclusivity is not proven. Beauty standards are set by an industry, which are set by people who are viewers. If viewers want more beautiful people on the screen, then even after you do a talent, even after you go through auditions and talent, you'll get more beautiful people on the screen. It also means that people who are more rich can afford better skincare, can go ahead and go to salons and look prettier essentially, and eat better food and healthier food, are the ones that go ahead and get the benefits of this. They are the ones that benefit from auditions because they have better networks, they have better agents and things like that, so they're able to get access to better auditions more quickly, and all of those benefits still happen. Which means that even on a talent base, they're not getting underprivileged people, they're not getting quote unquote not traditionally beautiful people, and they're not getting any benefit of going ahead and having the other employees as well. And we also proved to you in first speech how our content is significantly better, how medias are significantly larger. The response to that is literally an example on Star Wars, without telling us why indie films ever gain success. For all of these reasons, so proud to reach semifinals.
All right. Thank DLO for a wonderful mock. I'd like to welcome Government Whip whenever you're ready.
Hi, can I just confirm that I'm clearly visible and audible?
Yeah, yes to both.
Perfect. Before I start my speech, I just want to shout out my awesome team. I've had a really fun weekend debating with you guys. Let's keep progressing forward. Woohoo! My speech will begin on my, oh, by the way, for POIs, I don't check the chat, so just like unmute yourself. Totally fine. I'll take you at some point. My speech will begin on my first word. Panel, when our society rewards arbitrary factors, brushing aside vulnerable groups who have fought an unjust system again and again on merit alone, that is when society has failed us. 3 clashes in the speech. Firstly, on meritocracy and film quality and why we win that. We think it's the most important clash in this debate. Secondly, impacts on representation and social justice and why it's not symmetrical as Op wants to claim. Thirdly, on industry and why this clash is a wash and not important whatsoever in the debate. Let's talk about meritocracy. Leander specifically tells you that the value to society that your job provides is the way that jobs should be assigned. We restore meritocracy on our side of the house then and reward people fairly, which is the prerequisite of our utilitarian impacts, because we have to assume first and foremost that we live in a fair society that is able to reward fair rewarders before we are assigning value different to arbitrary groups, right? Op pushes back and say things like, popular people have marketability, but you generate value to your employer. I'll weigh this out on the fact that this principle matters based on the way we assign societal value to films. We care about the purpose of films. Let's gut check this really quickly. If I tell you right now that I deserve to win the debate because I can name 5 really interesting facts about Southeast Asia, and the judge is just really impressed by this and thinks, oh yes, this is the most value I've ever received in a 5-second, 5 list. Probably I'm assigning some value, but I'm not fulfilling the value of a movie industry. We care about meritocracy here because the movie industry is important to us. We want deep storytelling. We want entertainment value. We want accessibility in films. That's the actual value of them, not how much money they contribute. I'll note two impacts that we provide you then. Firstly, entertainment simply gets better based on this because meritocracy is upheld when you have the best people for the job like acting in the movie. That's the base of the capitalist society. When movies get better, that's when we achieve meritocratic principles, not when we're able to market to like Peru or whatever. Second impact is that the vulnerable actors just interact with movies a lot better based on this. Little girls who grow up dreaming of becoming actresses, seeing their stories shared, different people, seeing different people who like look like you, who come from the same background as you. It's principally good to let these people interact with films. I'll note the delta here. The majority view ends up being represented regardless because that's what, like, let's say most people look like. That's how most people behave, right? That's still, there's still an aspect of privilege when you're going into a job, right? What we tell you is we uniquely retain meritocracy, but also the value of movies to these groups that are locked out otherwise. It's not about your employer. It's about, is your movie providing societal value? On our side, it is. Second clash then on representation of minorities and accessibility. Darin successfully proved to you why star power is inherently based on racial and majoritarian stereotypes. Things like having a powerful and rich family with a well-known last name, things like conforming to dominating beauty standards, and thus the most overlooked talented actors end up coming from minority groups. That's the delta here. It's not like, that's when you are talented but can't become a star. It's when something societally is usually holding you back. This means that we create role models and deep entertainment values for these minority groups. I'll push us back and ask us, why do they need to be main characters? Can't they just have a cameo? No, your side can have a cameo because if Brad Pitt isn't there for 10 seconds, you can still market this and get all of your impact. On our side, the vulnerable person needs to be the main character because that's when they get the biggest access to things like awards, the best publicity, and notably the biggest opportunity to connect with the audience for two reasons. A, they have the most time on screen. That's the most time for connection. But also B, they're just the most central to the story. That means you're not seeing Brad Pitt overcome an obstacle. You're seeing someone that looks like you overcome an obstacle that you overcome in your day-to-day. That's when you get the best connection. Opt then tells us, oh, but we have more investment from these popular actors. These movies can then take more risks and promote liberal values. Liberal values here are at best a wash on Op because this motion is retrospective, which means directors are used to lead actors being the most talented and thus coming from a variety of different backgrounds. This means unless they're willing to say and concede that the entire movie industry would just collapse because everyone would suddenly stop watching movies, we actually are able to say that there is still some degree of investment. I'll prove why in a second why like slightly shrinking is not important, right? But also we can still have the like celebrity cameos. On our side, these values are then promoted in an authentic and better way. 4 ways this happens. Firstly, we get better width and depth. This is a weighing. I'll note, humans are creatures that just inherently, we want to connect to things. Like we're biologically wired. We nod and smile when people talk. We laugh at each other's jokes and it makes us feel good. Hugs literally release oxytocin. Like that's the happy hormone in your brain when you hug each other. We want to connect with people. It's in our biology, which means that films which are diverse allow many people, width weighing, to engage with a fundamental aspect of human connection, depth weighing. We feel deeply good then because we see ourselves, we set potential goals, we laugh at jokes, right? I'll note that I think it's much more important for an Indian person to be able to interact with an Indian film and laugh at jokes that like rely on some sort of Indian culture than it is for that movie to be suddenly marketable to like Peru or the US where people are just not going to connect with it as deeply. That's why the shrinking investment thing literally doesn't make sense and has no place in this debate. Before I continue, I'll take a POI.
It's not about comfortability in Peru. It's about like as an Indian person, I would likely be more comfortable watching somebody who's more famous because I know that movie has been made better because it had a larger budget. It's literally about entertainment and how the quality of entertainment.
All right, let's interact with this really quickly. I've already told you this is retrospective, which means investors are used to this, which means your burden then to push is that the best movies, which are still happening on our side, suddenly have zero budget. You haven't proved this. Investors go into investing movies because they understand that 4 million people, as Leander told you, still are in this market, right? 2 final impacts on our side, right? Firstly, on positive spillover, we're able to start dialogue. We're able to have a spillover additionally on non-minority groups, things like Instagram trends, things like movie reviews, etc., which means we're getting more positive societal dialogue on our side. But notably on the comparative, we also get less negative spillover because less people are able to internalize the extreme beauty standards that are perpetuated in the status quo. We also just give less power to these stars to sell products that perpetuate inequality, like, ooh, buy skin bleaching cream because your favorite celebrity had it from this movie. I'll end on a quick note. When I, as an Australian person, watch movies about Zac Efron running around on Bondi Beach, I feel literally nothing. I don't care how big that movie's budget was. When I watch The Castle, an Australian classic from the 80s, a movie that challenges the gentrification pushed by the Australian government onto minorities with no-name actors that killed it, I cry every time and I feel deeply connected to myself, my people, and my culture. So proud to be on government.
All right. Thank Government Whip for your wonderful remark. I'd like to invite the opposition whip whenever they're ready.
Cool. Am I clearly audible?
Yeah, you are.
Perfect. Just give me like 10 seconds to start through my notes and start my time. Cool. Manan going whip. Sorry, off whip. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The A, meritocracy, B, beauty standards, and C, representation of minorities. The principles may sound correct on the surface level, but we'll prove to I'll go ahead and take one of them, each one of them, and I'll prove to you why they do not accrue any of the benefits that they talk about. Let's go one by one. A, on meritocracy. So their idea is that now more talented people are chosen, but we take the most most charitable counterfactual. It still prove to you that even if you maybe take away nepotism on their paradigm, there are still multiple other factors that are likely going to come into play, which look like the person who has more money. Their like illustration of this is now the little girl feels that she also can go ahead and like become an actor. Notice now many other little girls also feel the same way because the industry is large and there's already a lot of competition, which means there's still the rich little girl is going to make it. It's not ever going to be the underprivileged little girl who's going to make it, because you need stuff like agents to get you through these these auditions. You need more and more like people with connects to get you through these auditions, because note that at a point in time that these number of people going to applying for this are also going to be are also already very very large. It still means that there are multiple other factors that come into play. At that point in the end goal of we take the most meritocratic people into this does not work. They take them on the most charitable case. Notice they say that because of meritocracy the movies just get better in quality. Two responsibility. That is the data on meritocracy is very very small, because notice panel like at a point in time that even if you take the paradigm on op in the most charitable case is also a few people who came through nepotism and are maybe staying longer than they should have and are people are a bit more talented when it comes to acting, but it does not translate into kind of the movie that is made, because there's so many other factors that goes into movie, which is A, funding, B, VFX, C, the kind of like the kind of videographers and editors that they're able to hire. At that point in time, we believe that the quality of the entertainment industry is a clash that we win on our side very very clearly, because we prove to you that stuff like budget goes into this. They say that maybe in investors will now accrue, now somehow start on the retrospect, be stable to be confident in investing in these movies. Vishwa already gives you multiple reasons why this does not happen, because there are alternative industries to invest into, the alternative things to do. At a point in time that they only invest here because they think that this is a safe investment, and it no longer feels safe, because at every point in time you're likely going to have a new person who is doing this, because at a point in time there is talent there, this talent is going to keep churning every 2 years, which means that there are always going to be new actors, so you never know which actor to take a risk on. At that point in time, just the amount of people investing in this industry will likely get lower, which means the quality of these movies will likely get lower, and the amount of people who get invested is likely going to be lower. This is a priori because you are not able to achieve the kind of benefit that they claim for these kind of minority people. At a point in time that the amount of movies that are created maybe get lower, but even if not that, the quality of movies get lower, which means that there are lesser viewers watching it. At that point in time, they need to prove on the counterfactual as to why investors keep investing, rather than just an assertion that maybe their mindset changed. Why does it change? No assertion. We give 4 layers of analysis as to how this producer thing happens. Secondly, on the idea of that this media gets representative, this is inherently untrue. They confuse beauty standards with the kind of representation. I'll give you two ways on how it gets representative on our side too. If you want to give kathas that they confuse the idea with, because a minority actor is playing, they're going to have a minority message. Notice, we can still have minority messaging on our side of the house. We can still create really good movies about the kind of struggle that minority face. There are really good movies like Gangu that are made about the kind of life that a sex worker lives, and it literally led to a lot of normalization in the world. At that point in time, we believe if the impact is that you want more minority messaging and you want to get them more catharsis, we believe it can still be done at a way better in a way better way on our side, when these movies have literally higher reach. On their side, maybe only the minority let's say only the minority that is playing the lead actor and the people of those community watch it. Now, because the movie is just way larger and has like a way more successful and way more marketable person being the lead actor, so many more people watched it, which was the case of Gangubai. At that point in time, we believe the messaging of this is at a way higher rate, and the entertainment industry becomes larger, which means that the kind of messaging that we wanted to do through it is just way bigger. But then secondly, notice that for you to be able to claim that this minority actor is able to get successful, they do not have any analysis of why people watch their movie. On our side, what you can do is the main actor plays the lead role, but there are so many other side characters where these minority actors and talent-based actors play, which is the current status quo. It looks like Rajkumar Rao starting as a side character and then doing well in a movie. On your side, you have no certainty, because it's likely going to be that most of these movies with these new actors are not going to do well, which means that producers lose confidence in these movies because they don't know which movie will do well and which movie is going to get reached. At that point in time, most of these producers will likely get disincentivized into producing a lot of these movies, which means that these movies progressively get lower and lower funding, which means that even if the actors are doing a lot of good acting, you do not have good enough VFX, which means that the quality of the industry just gets worse, which means that lower and lower people keep watching it, which means that even if the minority actor is getting more movies, he's not making more money or he's not getting more recognition. At that point in time, the end impact is not achieved. But then on the third idea of beauty standards and that principle, notice there are way more exclusive ways in which beauty standards have been propagated. These have been societal narratives that have been present way before the entertainment industry has been in play. But then secondly, consumerism is literally one of the main reasons why beauty standards are going to be in play. Notice it is a causation and effect problem. Entertainment industry uses people who are more beautiful because that is how the society perceives these people. Notice even in their own speech, they use more ugly people being casted, means that they themselves are being they themselves know that these beauty standards are in place. At a point in time that they themselves cannot get away from the fact that these people are ugly, why would I go and watch a movie that where the actor is ugly? The only impact is that all of the people from these community or people who look like they would watch their movie, which is just an impact so much lower on scale. At the end of the day, we prove to you that the entertainment industry just gets way better on our side. The benefits of this are very simple. It is a very important escape for the people for the world, which means that the scale reaches to everyone, because watching shows, watching movies is an important source of dopamine in this fast-paced world. And secondly, it's a massive way of sending out messages, and so it's just way higher on depth, because now entertainment industry, because you can send out so many more important messages. But lastly, the employability clash is one very clearly on us. 3 layers of weighing. Scale, because there are so many other kind of people that are employed by the entertainment industry, which looks like videographers and which looks like editors, which look like background characters and side dancers. But then secondly, on likelihood and certainty, because notice we proved that meritocracy is not just dependent on talent, but for these people, the likelihood of them, there is no differentiation in them. So means if the pie gets larger and there are more of these people being casted, we believe that more and more meritocratic video editors would get employment, which is a certain impact. And lastly, on vulnerability, these people are only dependent on the entertainment industry, and they have like small wages, which means that it's important that they keep getting like more movies. At that point in time, employability and protecting these actors is also considered on our side. We win that clash too for all those reasons. Very, very proud to read semis.
All right. Thank Opposition Whip for your wonderful remark. I'd like to welcome Opposition Reply whenever you're ready.
Just give me like 20 seconds. All right. Are we clear, audible? Just confirming once before I start my speech.
Yeah, you are.
All right. Yes. I want to be very clear about the path to victory that exists on opposition, right? But before that, one clarification. Proposition for the first two speeches actually get thrown off with a POI that we asked to the Prime Minister and respond that till the end of deputy, not realizing that actually off flash because that POI has nothing to do with our case regarding casting a 10-minute main character as such. Somewhere in the GovWeb, they do realize that they need to have a counterfactual for them to have a comparator in the first place. So they make up something like this is a retrospective debate. So producers get habituated to the fact that you don't need popular actors for you to generate revenue. But why? They don't give any likelihood analysis. Panel, look at your notes once. Even if you have one line of likelihood analysis that does get flipped by already existing material that deals with it preemptively, right? What is material? I'm going to explain to you metric by metric that proposition themselves set up as to why we win in those metrics by expanding the entertainment industry, by not letting entertainment industry shrink on their side of the house because of lesser funding influx, and secondly, by the virtue of quality of content and receptiveness of messaging that exists in this content. Side government bases their path to victory on two things. Firstly, on principle of meritocracy, right? There are three massively unfulfilled burdens that deters them from unlocking their benefits. Firstly, they don't prove why people who are not privileged will still get into the industry or still get into as main characters just because you have a talent-based process that they still assert in their counterfactual. Even when we let go of the fact that they don't have likelihood analysis, this is still not proved or this is still not linked to the end outcome, right? Even if you think that this push we consistently put up throughout our speeches is uncharitable, we analyze to you the flip side of it, which goes unresponded to, right? Another reason due to which the margin of victory is significant. What is that? People who are privileged have more access to these networks or access to the information that where these auditions are happening, even when the talent-based frameworks are set up. What this then means is that A, because of the information asymmetry that exists across economic classes because of the networks that you have, you are not even able to know to the same extent that a rich person knows despite you having greater skills. Secondly, you can simply afford better agents, which means you simply have more network or more access to these. And thirdly, right, what we tell you is you can afford more healthy foods or acting classes to pander to latest trends in acting and even adapt to trends and stuff, whatnot, right? Because you have wealth and because you have privilege in the first place. What all this means is that all this directly pokes a hole in their unanalyzed or even in the best case underanalyzed case of people who are not privileged eventually get in. The second weighing then that already exists in the debate that handles with this is like interesting, right? Even in the best case, when the main actor is chosen purely based on merit, even if you ignore all the things I've said so far, when we prove that the influx of budget is far bigger on our side of the house, the 4,000 other people, such as side actors, cinematographers, assistant workers, or even interns that are given employment based on the merit, where's their own metric, which means, like, I'm not sure why you should consider the meritocracy being applied to main character as opposed to all these 4,000 other people. On their side, this 4,000 becomes 100 because of the lesser budget that exists, right? So in the absence of weighing of why like meritocracy is particularly important for to be applied for main characters, we weigh over them on their own metric on scale. Lastly, notice the metric that they posit for meritocracy, right? It's literally on the value provided to the industry. We prove to you three things through three layers of analysis. Firstly, for producers, we tell you that they have more revenue potential, and that's why you provide more value through more popular actors that are more marketable. Secondly, through content and clarity, like quality of media that comes out, which means like you have more quality or more quality of content because of the higher budget that you have, that you can afford to spend on things like CGI, cinematography, and whatnot. Thirdly, for audience, you simply provide more entertainment value when they trust the actor, when they go to the cinema in the first place. Secondly, minorities being casted as the main character means that this community served well. In the absence of receptiveness, I'm not sure how they analyze that. And that's why we win this debate.
All right. Thank opposition Whip for your wonderful remark. And finally, I'd like to invite the government reply whenever you're ready.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Thanks. A good sign that a team has lost a debate is when their greatest push to our case is one that would make the debate entirely symmetric and something not even worth talking about for a 2-minute conversation, let alone a full-on debate. Panel, when they walk up and tell you that the counterfactual is that we hire other rich and beautiful people because they're privileged, I genuinely don't understand what the debate is about then. We are regretting that we hire people for their star power because star power is characterized by privilege. It is characterized by things that you cannot control and things that you cannot improve upon. They then say, no, it is impossible for you to hire people that do not have star power because they are rich and privileged. Panel, this is exactly what we're regretting. If not, the debate is entirely symmetrical. If it is not possible to hire people that do not have star power, then literally no change occurs on either side of the house. It is the exact same flat, symmetrical debate. I don't think this is what the CAs intended for us to argue when they set this motion. I have more faith in them than that. But secondly, like, we do give analysis as to why you would hire people that are less privileged on our side of the house. Notably, panel, we aren't saying that you're going to be hiring homeless people to be the main character of your movie. We're saying at the point at which you disregard factors that are outside of the actor's control, that is to say their last name, their appearances, how Western their features are, you focus more on the acting, the actual skills they're able to bring to the table. I think that it is more likely that somebody from a less privileged background is more likely than to be able to shine. This was the case we gave you from first, unresponded to. They just pretended we didn't mechanize it. That does not mean the words have vanished from your flow notes panel. Check for it. They're there. Two things that we beat them on. One, why more money and investment in movies gets significantly outweighed by all of our benefits. Let's be clear here. Their impact is that you get more money to 1, actors, 2, producers, and 3, more money to produce movies overall. I think there's an issue here. 1, they never fail to actually prove the impact. That is to say, they throw around terms like, visual effects get better in movies, but what is the marginal benefit, right? Does it mean that we go from having 1 explosion to 3? How much more enjoyment does this make people derive from movies? On the flip side, Alisa and Leander explained how low-budget movies that are closely tied to you, movies that hire people that have your appearance and people that you can more closely relate to and look up to, are more likely to be even more enjoyable to you, even if they're less funded. I don't think they ever hit home on the impacting of this. Notably, we also beat them on exclusivity, right? That is to say, if people don't work on movies, they can work other jobs. We say this, they don't respond. They just pretend this is the only way for people to make money. Secondly, we outweigh this impact significantly. How do we do so? A, we explain that the principle of meritocracy is logically prior, more on that later. But B, we beat them on both scope and severity. That is to say, we did 2 things. 1, we explained how more people are hurt by the negative stereotyping that are pushed on by hiring people purely for their appearances, purely for their last name. Insofar as the impact is huge, insofar as most people are now going to be coerced into listening to these people. They're going to buy their skincare products that are bad for them. They're going to chemically dye their hair to look more like these people because they were hired, particularly because they could have this effect on people. They were hired because they were attractive. They were hired because they had Western features that can make people feel jealous, that can coerce them into doing things and buying products that are actively bad for them. Notably, one, this beats them on scale, insofar as the amount of people who consume and watch the movie are far greater than the amount of people who are employed in the process of making a movie, but also secondly, in the worst case scenarios, again, we outweigh on severity. Alisa talks to you about how this makes people anxious or this makes people do things that they otherwise wouldn't because they're coerced. We beat them on both those metrics. We outweigh. Now then, onto the principle. Panel, we very straightforwardly prove to you that hiring people on things that they cannot control or hiring people for things that they cannot improve upon is not meritocratic. That is to say, if there are actors who work harder than you who aren't going to be hired because we focus on star power, which are things that these actors necessarily cannot improve. The responses are just no, because producers purely have a responsibility to be profit maximizing. That's what we hire these actors for. Therefore, that's utility. But like, why? Why should we operate based off of this principle? We actually analyze why meritocracy is important, why it's something that people care about, and they just go, producers need to maximize utility. Compare these two principles, panels. Which one do you more intrinsically buy into? The one that people should be judged based off of what they do, or the one that says we ought to maximize profits? I think it's intuitively the one that we present. Proud to stand on government.